My top 5 favourite Smiths singles, I could have ranked them all, but I decided just to narrow it down to the 5 that mean the most to me personally. This is just my humble opinion, this is not gospel. The first single is from their final studio album, Strangeways, Here We Come. It is I Started Something I Couldn't Finish. In fact, I first became aware of this band when I discovered that they had used an image from The Family Way on the sleeve of this single. This is, of course, Avril Angers in the church. You see the church windows in the background, the ceiling. Fantastic use of the image. Of course, this kind of kitchen sink imagery that Morrissey used really appealed to me. You know, I was already obsessed with kitchen sink. So to discover a group that used kitchen sink characters or people from that landscape on the artwork, that really appealed to me, and helps that the music is fantastic as well. Lyrically, it's a very mysterious song. Of course, that's typical of Morrissey. He's always very vague about who or what his songs are actually about. It's kind of left to our imagination. Some have suggested that it's about a rape or unsolicited sex. If you pay attention to the lyrics, the lyrics fit that narrative, I suppose. I forced you to a zone that you were clearly never meant to go. The lanes were silent. I started something, but now I'm not too sure. Yada yada yada. There's an anecdote that Stephen Street often tells, how during the recording of that song, Morrissey wasn't pleased with the guitars on the track, and he said to Stephen Street, "You tell Johnny to change it." Johnny responded something along the lines of, you tell him to come up with something better if he's not happy. And that was supposedly a rare occasion that they had a spat in the studio. Typically, it was quite harmonious, believe it or not. It's hard to believe now because those two are always kind of at each other's throats. But in the 80s, they were bosom buddies, soulmates, as it were. So yes, there's I Started Something I Couldn't Finish from the final album. The B-side is actually from the Troy Tate sessions, Pretty Girls Make Graves. That has a cello. I think this is the version with the cello. Next we have from The Queen Is Dead, often described as their best album, The Boy with the Thorn in His Side. This is the Record Store Day edition with Albert Finney on the sleeve. The original sleeve featured Truman Capote, but that's not the only difference on this Record Store Day version. The B-side has been changed to Rubber Ring, and it's the Drone Studios demo version. Rubber Ring originally was on the 12-inch. The original B-side on the 7-inch was Asleep, a very kind of melancholy, dark, disturbing song with a piano and vocals. And reportedly it encouraged a handful of fans to commit suicide. So these people were found dead after taking their own lives, and that single was on the turntable. So perhaps they changed the B-side for that reason, to prevent further suicides. I don't know. I think it's a better song anyway, really. Rubber Ring. Record Store Day edition. Of course, interesting to note that Albie Finney was asked for his permission back in the 80s if he would give approval, because they wanted to use his image on Heaven Knows I'm Miserable Now. He initially declined, but then his daughter said, oh, come on. She was a big fan of the Smiths, so she said, oh, give them permission. But by that time it was too late, and they'd gone with Viv Nicholson instead. That iconic image of Viv Nicholson on the cobble streets with the terraced houses in the background. Next we have, from the debut album, we have What Difference Does It Make? Terence Stamp there on the sleeve. He initially declined. He refused to give his permission. So they recreated the shot with Morrissey replicating the pose. But then eventually Terence Stamp had a change of heart, presumably, and gave his permission. So you have two versions of the sleeve. And of course that's perfect for rough trade, for the label, because collectors will buy both. The John Porter version, the single version, is very different from the original radio session that was recorded on the John Peel radio show. That version is much more rough around the edges, of course. And the drums are much more expressive, lots of fills, much more punky, shall we say. And the bass is very sprightly and energetic. But John Porter's version, who of course produced the debut album, he toned down the drums down to a very basic beat. I think Morrissey, in his autobiography, described them as too scared to move or something like that. You can barely hear the bass, but the guitars are pushed to the front of the mix, and the guitars are fantastic on that track. Perhaps John Porter, his approach was to make the record more accessible to the dance floor, or for DJs to play at discos, so you could dance to it. Perhaps that was the approach. But I know it left a bad taste in Morrissey's mouth. He kind of fell out with the song. They never played it live again after the release of the single. And a lot of fans do prefer the Hatful of Hollow compilation, which has all of those radio sessions that were recorded for John Peel and Kid Jensen, that have a much more kind of raw sound. As I say, rough around the edges, recorded in one or two takes. And essentially they were live, weren't they? the studio. But I like both. It depends what mood I'm in. It depends what mood I'm in that decides which version I want to listen to. Next we have their second single, and this really put them on the map. It really established the Smiths in the public eye. That it got them on Top of the Pops. They made their debut on Top of the Pops, and the nation was introduced to this band. The front man was swinging gladioli, wearing oversized clothes and jewelry and beads and the rest of it, and a quiff. Very kind of striking. And who could forget that guitar riff that's supposedly Johnny Marr's most complicated riff to play? I'm of course describing This Charming Man, with Jean Marais on the sleeve from the... Yeah, so they Morrissey wouldn't just use kitchen sink imagery. There were lots of kind of French new wave stars on the sleeves as well. Such a memorable kind of song, and lyrically again, Morrissey, who knows what the song is really about. People have come to the conclusion that it's an encounter between an older man, shall we say, who picks up this young guy in his car after seeing him on a hillside, with a punctured bicycle. There is a lyric in the song that goes, the jumped up pantry boy who doesn't know his place. And that's originally from Sleuth, the film. Laurence Olivier delivers that line to Michael Caine. And of course, one of Andy Rourke's best bass lines, really infectious, tuned up bass line, all over the place, as all of his bass lines are. Finally, my favourite single that they ever released, their debut, recorded at Strawberry Studios in 1983 in Stockport. I am of course referring to Hand in Glove, Naked Man on the Sleeve. Just a truly incredible record, and it illustrates how no one in this lineup was dispensable. Everyone pulls their own weight on this record. These are some of Morrissey's most passionate, striking lyrics. Hand in glove, the sun shines out of our behinds. What an opening line, and what a way to introduce your band to the world with an opening lyric like that. Andy Rourke's energetic, funky, sprightly bass line right at the front of the mix. It drives the song. It's the heart and soul of the track. And that's where John Porter went wrong when he remixed Hand in Glove for the debut album. He practically suffocates the bass and brings up the guitars to the point which you can barely hear the bass, and that misses the point, because the bass is the heart and soul of the song. It drives the song. And this was the early days when Joyce still played in that kind of self-taught style that we associate with punk drummers. and that's evident on Hand in Glove and on all of the radio sessions. Of course, John Porter. Most studio producers don't like self-taught drummers. You know, that they like session players who can do rolls and are much more kind of technical. Supposedly they did try to change drummers when they were making the debut, but they stood by Mike Joyce. What can I say? What more can I say? This is their best single as far as I'm concerned. It might not. It didn't enter the mainstream charts. They required This Charming Man to kind of break into the mainstream, but this was certainly appreciated in the independent scene at the time in the early 80s. This Charming Man was the watershed moment. So yes, thanks again. Hope you enjoyed the video. Do you have a favourite single? Let me know. Do you agree with my list, my determinations? So there we have it. Thanks again.